Welcome to my YouTube channel Bachelor and Master English. Are you new to this channel? If so, please subscribe it. Please listen to my discussion on poetry and its oldest classification that includes epic, dramatic, lyric and didactic. A poem is a composition written for performance by the human voice. Person who writes the poem is called a poet. The poem often expresses a poet's deep emotional response to the work or situation. What your eyes sees on the page is the composer's verbal score, waiting for you and your voice to bring it alive as you read it aloud or hear it in your mind's ear. Unlike your reading of a newspaper, the best reading, that is to say, the most satisfying reading of a poem, involves simultaneous engagement of eye and ear. The eye, attentive not only to the meaning of words, but to their grouping and spacing as lines on a page, the ear attuned to the grouping and spacing of sounds. The more you understand of musical notation and the principles of musical composition, the more you will understand and appreciate a composer's score. Similarly, the more you understand of versification, that is, the principles and practice of writing verse, the more you are likely to understand and appreciate poetry, and in particular, the intimate relationship between its form and its content. What a poem says or means is the result of how it is said, a fact that poets are often at pains to emphasize. All my life, said W. H. Auden, I have been more interested in technique than anything else. And T. S. Eliot claimed that the conscious problems with which one is concerned in the actual writing are more than those of quasi-musical nature. In the arrangement of metric and pattern, that of a conscious exposition of ideas, fortunately, the principles of versification are easier to explain than those of musical composition. Poetry was divided into three main types by Greek philosopher Aristotle. They were comedy, tragedy, and epic. Today, poetry and literary scholars believe that poetry does not contain those Aristotelian three genres. Epic. An epic poem is a long narrative piece focusing on the story of one or more heroic characters. It is genre of narrative poem or cycle of poems dealing with some great deed, often the founding of a nation or the forging of national unity, and often using religious or cosmological themes. The two main epic poems in the Western tradition are the Iliad and the Odyssey, attributed to the ancient Greek poet Homer, which was probably intended to be chanted in sections at feast, sometimes called heroic poetry. An epic poem may employ the meter, that is formal structure, termed heroic verse. Greek and later criticism, which considered the Homeric epic the highest form of poetry, produced the genre of secondary epic, such as Aeneid of Roman Virgil, Italian poet Tasso's Jerusalem Delivered, and English poet John Milton's Paradise Lost, which attempted to emulate Homer, often for a patron or of a political cause. The term is also applied to narrative poems of other traditions, the Anglo-Saxon Beowulf and the Finnish Kalevala. In India, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata and the Babylonian Gilgamesh. All of these evolved in different societies to suit similar social needs and use similar literary techniques. Because of the length of epic poems and their concern with important themes, the term epic is often applied to works that are written on a large scale and are considered to be of great importance. In his uh, critical work, Defense of Poesy, Sir Philip Sidney claims epic is the best and most accomplished kind of poetry. It is frequently extended to several books, sections of several hundred lines, on a great and serious subject. For instance, Spenser's The Fairy Queen, Milton's Paradise Lost, Wordsworth's The Prelude, and Elizabeth Barrett Browning's Aurora Leigh. With one notable exception, Morel's The Changing Light at Hanover, the few poems of comparable length to have been written in the 20th century. For example, William Carlos Williams Patterson and Ezra Pound's cantos have a freer, less formal structure. So this is all about epic as a form of traditional. Now let's talk about dramatic. Dramatic, a poetry, monologue, or dialogue written in the voice of a character assumed by the poet. That's called dramatic. Dramatic poetry is written in verse that is meant to be spoken. It generally tells a story but can also portray a situation. The majority of dramatic poetry is written in blank verse. Dramatic poetry presents the voice of an imaginary character or characters speaking directly without any additional narration by the author. A dramatic poem, according to T.S. Eliot, does not consist of what the poet would say in his own person, but only what he can say within the limits of one imaginary character addressing another imaginary character. Strictly speaking, the term dramatic poetry describes any verse written for the stage. And until a few centuries ago, most playwrights like William Shakespeare and Moliere wrote their plays mainly in verse. But the term most often refers to the dramatic monologue, a poem written as a speech made by a character other than the author. At some decisive moment, a dramatic monologue is usually addressed by the speaker to some other character who remains silent. If the listener replies, the poem becomes a dialogue in which the story unfolds in the conversation between two speakers. The Victorian poet Robert Browning, who developed the form of the dramatic monologue, liked to put words in the mouths of characters who were conspicuously nasty, weak, reckless, or crazy. See, for instance, Browning's soliloquy of the Spanish cloister, in which the speaker is an obsessively proud and jealous monk. The dramatic monologue has been a popular form among American poets, including Edwin Arlington Robinson, Robert Frost, Ezra Pound, Randall Jarrell, and Sylvia Plath. The most famous dramatic monologue ever written is probably Browning's My Last Duchess, in which the poet creates a Renaissance Italian duke whose words reveal more about himself than the aristocratic speaker intends. The Renaissance authors like Christopher Marlowe, William Shakespeare, Ben Jonson have written all important dramatic poetry. Robert Browning's My Last Duchess and Porphyria's Lover and Alfred Lord Tennyson's Ulysses are dramatic monologues. Howard's response to that poem, My Last Duchess, in Nicholas Madruz to his master Ferdinand, Count of Tyrol, 1565, are some of the examples of dramatic poetry. After discussing about dramatic poetry, let's talk about lyric. Lyric, originally a song, performed in ancient Greece to the accompaniment of a small harp-like instrument called a lyre. The lyric was a poem sung to the music of a lyre. This earlier meaning of poem made for singing is still current today when we use lyrics to mean the words of a popular song. But this kind of printed form we now call a lyric is usually something else. For over the past 500 years, the nature of lyric poetry has changed greatly. Ever since the rise of the printing press in the 15th century, poets have written less often for singers more than for readers. In general, this tendency has made lyric poems contain less word music, and since they can be pondered on a page, more thought and perhaps most complicated feelings. Here is a rough definition of a lyric as it is written today. A short poem expressing the thoughts and feelings of a single speaker. Often a poet will write a lyric in the first person. I will arise and go now, and go to Innisfree. But not always. Instead, a lyric might describe an object or recall an experience without the speaker's or ever bringing himself or herself into it. For an example of such a lyric, one in which the poet refrains from saying, I see William Carlos Williams' The Red Wheelbarrow, Theodore Rothke's Root Cellar, or Gerard Manley Hopkins' Pie Beauty. Perhaps because, rightly or wrongly, some people still think of lyrics as lyre strummings. They expect a lyric to be an outburst of feeling, somewhat resembling a song, at least containing musical elements such as rhyme, rhythm, or sound effects. Such expectations are fulfilled in the Lake Isle of Innisfree, that impassioned lyric full of language rich in sound, as you will hear if you will read it aloud. In practice, though, many contemporary poets write poems in which they voice opinions or complicated feelings, poems that no reader would dream of trying to sing. Most people would call such poems lyrics too, but in the sense in which we use lyric will usually apply to a kind of poem. Lyric is now used for any fairly short form in the voice of a single speaker, although that speaker may sometimes quote others. Lyrics present personal and emotional poetry, laments, complaints, and even love poetry. The readers should be wary of identifying the lyric speaker with the poet, since the I of a poem will frequently be that of a fictional character invented by the poet. Today, lyrics in the English language seem more plentiful than other kinds of poetry. Now it's time to talk about didactic poetry. Poetry that instructs either in terms of morals or by providing knowledge of philosophy, religion, arts, science, or skills is didactic poetry. It was more fashionable form of poetry in former times. It is regarded as a fourth variety of poetry, although it was not regarded as a separate genre by either Greek or Roman theorists. Its aim was to instruct the reader in a particular subject matter, be it science, philosophy, hunting, farming, love, or some other art or craft. Although some poets believe that all poetry is inherently instructional, didactic poetry separately refers to poems that contain a clear moral or message or purpose to convey to its readers. This form of poetry was apparently written to state a message, reach a body of knowledge. Didactic poetry is normally addressed to a particular individual who is seen as the primary object of instruction and acts as a model for the reader. Didactic poetry preferably deals with specialized and at times obscure topics and appears to become a showcase of poetic dexterity. In a lyric, a speaker may express sadness. In a didactic poem, she may explain that sadness is inherent in life. But it may be argued that the subject of didactic poetry does not make it any less poetical. Good poems, it seems, can be written about anything under the sun. John Milton's epic Paradise Lost and Alexander Pope's An Essay on Man are some of the famous examples of didactic poetry. Okay, with this discussion, I have come to the end of my topics discussion. So, how did you get it? Please put your comments in my comment box. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and like this channel. Thank you very much.